Hello, I'm Vicky and welcome back to my book vlog. Once again we find ourselves in the middle of a lockdown, which we all thought we'd be out of by now, and we're almost into April, which means that on the 23rd of April, again this year, it's World Book Night. I began my YouTube journey basically making a vlog for World Book Night last year. I did a poem called The Invisible Enemy, which you can also find on my channel. And then recently, in March, I did a World Book Day video, the first one of those I've done, where I talked about a lot of children's books. So I thought, why not have another go and let's do another one. Let's make a start, shall we? The first book I'm going to talk about, I read about around about the end of December 2019. And it is this one. Books, Baguettes and Bedbugs. That's a better view of it for you. And it's by Jeremy Mercer. Basically this is a non-fiction book. The author leaves his crime journalist job. He writes about crime, covers actual crime in America, and he goes off just for a journey, and he ends up in Paris, where he finds himself at this bookshop, Shakespeare and Company, and basically it's about the things that he did and the characters and the people that he met that either lived or worked in the store or came into the store on a regular basis. And for those of you who'd like a little bit of history of this book, it says, Shakespeare and Company in Paris is one of the world's most famous bookshops, originally the haunt of literary greats such as Ernest Hemingway, Gertrude Stein and James Joyce. It later became the principal meeting place for beatnik poets. Allen Ginsberg and William S. Burroughs were both visitors. And this tells us, as I say, all about the people that he met there. It also tells you about how he basically didn't have any money and how they managed to live on next to nothing, how they managed to find food, and then how they managed to share it out between them. The thing that I particularly liked about this myself is that there's a conversation or a discussion that goes on about how books should be shelved. So you might find you would enjoy this book because it does talk about a lot of books and authors. You might find yourself doing some research on the books that are there. It's one that I really enjoyed. I passed it round my family and then I asked for it back because I'll probably read it again at some point. I can recommend this one. Moving on, again talking about lockdown, this is another book I read, and this was during last year's lockdown in April. It is actually Vanessa Green, The Beachside Guest House. Now, what we'll find with this is it's basically just a lovely story about love, friendship and holidays. There are the plot is that there are three ladies who, as teenagers, when they were friends, they went to this Greek island, Paros, when they were teenagers, and they had a lovely time. And I won't give away the whole story, but they end up going back to the island to visit it when they are older. Their experiences are, some of the same and some are different. When I first read this, I thought, shall I give it a 4 or shall I give it a 5 star? And at first I was going to give it a 4 star, but it became a 5 star purely because the story is so simple. It's a lovely story. If, like me, you were reading it or you want to read it and you can't go very far, this book really gives you the feel for Greece and the heat, the tourism, the people who live there, the people who run the shops and cafes there. And it's just a very lovely story. You can feel the heat coming through in the pages, and the sunshine. It's just such a lovely, pleasant book that will get you through. So if you want to feel like you haven't read this and you want a pick-me-up, this is a really good pick-me-up book. Thirdly, we come on to another non-fiction book, and this time it's written by that well-known TV presenter Davina McCall, Lessons I've Learned. This is actually my daughter's book. I bought it her for a Christmas present. And basically Davina tells you about all the things that has helped her through, all the mistakes that she's made, and how to, how to basically perhaps do things that you weren't sure about doing. She also gives good tips on it's a good idea to wear good underwear, which I really like that one. She also talks about your mum not being your best friend, which I agree with completely. I can see that straight away. There is some information in here that I think is perhaps not original because I've read it before, but obviously if you haven't read it before, you might find that information or advice is really helpful. She is, as usual, writing in the style that you would imagine that she would write in as herself, very chatty, very down to earth. It's just a very good, easy read, again, for something different. And the thing is, it's in sections, so you can pick and choose. If you've not got very long to read, it's easy to put it down and then to pick it back up again after a little while. But I can recommend Davina's book. It's very good. Now I'm going to talk about a book here that not many people will have heard of at this point. It's the first time that I've read an independently published book printed by Amazon. My son is a friend of the author, and it's not a genre that I normally read. It's called Each Little Universe, and it's by Chris Durston. So, the thing with this book is, as I say, it's not a genre I normally read. Now, because my son helped the author, he's got a signed copy there, and also in the back, another thing that he's very proud of, in the top corner there, he's got an acknowledgement, which is lovely. When I started to read this book, I thought to myself, this is really great. People who like science fantasy, science fiction, are really going to enjoy this book. Also, if you're the kind of person that plays games that are like Dungeons and Dragons, etc., the way this plot is moved along is that some of the characters will play a game of Dungeons and Dragons, or that kind of story on the tabletop, to decide what move they're going to make next in actual life. And also there's a character in it that you think, is this person actually real, or are they from somewhere else? You can easily enjoy this book if you're not into that kind of genre. The other thing that I enjoyed about this book when I first read it was that it reads, or rather the part of it reads, the conversation between TM, one character called TM, and the other character called Veggie, remind me of my son and his best friend having a conversation. So it's really up to date. I'll just read you a little bit from the first chapter. The first chapter begins at part 1 before, and here we are, the first chapter, the Octobike. Octobike, said TM firmly. Veggie digested this for a moment. Octobike. Octobike. Veggie withdrew the spoon he had been absently swirling around his mug of tea and tapped it against his jaw, leaving watery brown droplets collecting on his chin. I don't follow. TM groaned. All right, hear me out. I thought I was hearing you out, and very proficiently too. Okay, fine, so get this. TM spread his hands wide, fingers splayed, and bobbed his palms with each syllable for emphasis. Octo, Veggie nodded. Bike. Veggie considered the prospect. His head turned to one side, then the other, considering the suggestion with all the weight and magnitude it deserved. He looked all around the little cafe, taking in the gaudy plastic tables and the offensively neutral walls. He looked at TM, then up at the heavens. Octobike? He said eventually. Octobike, come on, Veg. TM plonked his elbow down on the table between them, then rested his chin with what he hoped was compelling exasperation in his palm. Bike, trike, skip a few steps, Octobike. Ta-da! Next big thing, 100% guaranteed. Not sure I'm seeing it. For hex, fine, just, okay, imagine a quad bike. Quad? Right. 4 wheels, 4 flipping, quad bike. Quad bike. Then, shana, double it. 2 quad bikes. TM burbled, head flopping forwards. I'm trying, protested Veggie, watching his friend suffer. It's not like the super most easiest thing to visualise. Not a word, said TM, resurfacing and stretching out in his too small chair. Anyway, all that shows is your lack of imagination, which is in no way indicative of the definitely amazing future in which the Octobike takes the world by storm. Said Veggie. The two looked at each other in mutual expectation for a moment, each curious as to what the other might say next, followed by the realisation that neither actually had anything more to say on the topic. Hey, said TM eventually, just so they wouldn't be staring silently at each other anymore. You got cash? Veggie plucked a 20p piece out of his pocket and placed it on the table with pride, like a checkers player making what he thought was a genius move. Yup. Amazing. You get this one, Veggie said, grinning. TM dug out a couple of pound coins from his back pocket. They were the old kind, the ones that had been out of circulation for a couple of years, but beggars couldn't be choosers of the relative fanciness of their coinage. He slapped them down next to Veggie's tiny heptagonal fortune, did a quick count, and nodded. That'll do. That's just a taste of the first part of the book. And the other thing I like about Chris Durston's book is that he uses a lot of really, really good words that I haven't read before. And I have to admit, there was one word I came across in this book, and I'm not saying what word that is in case anybody reads it. And I really thought, that isn't a word. And I did actually have to get out the dictionary to find that I was wrong. It was, in fact, a word. Well done to Chris for that. It's not very often I have to get out a dictionary to check a word and its existence. I really did enjoy that. So Chris, if you do watch this, cheers. I really enjoyed the book and I can recommend it highly. Now then, if you've not donned off during that little flirtation with a part of a novel, you'll probably be familiar with these two, Torval and Dean, and you've probably read this book already. This was published in 2014, and it's Our Life on Ice, the autobiography by Torval and Dean. These two are a massive part of my life from many years ago. They talk about a lot of ice shows and competitions and the Dancing on Ice programme that they do on the television at the moment. So most of the information in here, I've already read it before in another book, but I've already knew of it anyway. If you're a fan and you haven't read this, it's a very easy read. It's a lovely book. However, the one that has more detail in is the one published years ago by John Hennessy. And something's just dropped out of my book I'm going to show you in a minute. This is the previous book to the one I've just talked about. This goes into a lot more detail because the 2014 version doesn't really cover a lot of their dancing, etc. in great detail. The other book, if you haven't read it, which is very good, is called Facing the Music. That is really detailed and is a great read. When I was researching this, I found two things in the front of this older book. One is a very tiny picture on a cigarette card. That's Torvill and Dean Bolero, and it's talking about their Olympic challenge in 1992. But also, I found this amazing poster, which I'd forgotten that I'd got. And I've kept it in the book for posterity. Here it is. I'll just step out of the way a minute. I'll just stand. There you go. Torvill and Dean. There it is. Let me just stretch it out a bit for you. Torvill and Dean's poster with the Russian All-Stars, the tour, and on the back we have this one. It's surprising what you can find in your books that you forget that you have. It's in almost perfect condition apart from the fact that it's creased. But it was a really nice thing to find in the book that I'd forgotten about. Lovely memento. So if you haven't read Torvill and Dean and you want something easy to read and very interesting, this is the book. I started learning to skate quite late when I was 14. I'd always wanted to learn, and I wanted another skill for a while I was thinking about going on the stage. I didn't do horse riding, and I thought, here's the thing I can start to do and have a skill. And I went for class lessons and I've never looked back, and skating is a huge part of my life. And I always have to read the next book that they bring out. And here we are. In my last vlog on World Book Day, I gave a little teaser as to one of the books that I was going to talk about. And that book is even more well known than it was before, and that is Good Omens. I have to admit, I only read this book because I watched the TV series that had Michael Sheen and David Tennant in it. Many of you know that I like David Tennant. I think his acting is always really exciting, and they're both excellent at what they do. So having watched the TV series, which I really enjoyed, I thought, right, now is the time to make it right and read the book. Because again, Good Omens is not the kind of book that I would normally go for. And in fact, there's two, you can get the black copy of this as well as the white copy. I chose a white copy of this because, to my own knowledge from shelving books, there aren't very many that are published with white covers, and I really like the fact that it has a white cover rather than the black cover. I have to say, I'm glad that I read the book after I'd watched the TV series, because I think I would have struggled with the book otherwise. I did actually read a lot of reviews that were rather like mine. I thought they would all say, oh, it's excellent, it's a great book. But I'm glad that I watched TV series first, because I found it, for me personally, easier to follow. I found there was a lot of conversation in the book that otherwise I might have had difficulty with. And on occasion I did find that it galloped along a little bit too much, and I went back and reread it. But also the conversations between Aziraphale and Crowley were, for me, in the voices of Michael Sheen and David Tennant, obviously, because I'd watched the series, but for me that actually helped me. I did find a little bit of a struggle for the last 75 pages to get through it. I did feel a bit like, if you haven't seen it, Crowley in the Bentley when it's, well, how should I put it, when it's rather hot, shall I say, not to give away the plot. So it was a good job that I had watch the TV series first. And for me, as I say, the TV series is better. This book is still excellent. I just prefer the TV series. But if you haven't, again, tried this kind of genre, if you fancy something different, it isn't difficult to read. It's quite well written in a way that's easy to... It's not very complicated, basically. But have a go and see what you think. Now, I always usually try and find a reason to drop in a Jane Austen novel, because there are several I have yet to talk about. Jane Austen is my favourite author, and I can in fact read her more than once. I still have several books about Jane Austen on my shelf that I haven't actually either fully read or read at all yet, but I will get round to those at some point. The one I'm going to talk about now is the one that is probably the most famous for those of you who watch some on the television. I don't. It's this one. It's Pride and Prejudice. Now, a long time ago, I have a good friend who I was at school with, and she bought me this as a present, and I do think it was the first one I got that switched me on to Jane Austen. And I thought, oh, I'll try this. I don't know if I'm old enough to read it yet, but I loved it from the word go. And this edition is the Purnell edition, and again it has colour plates inside it. It even has some halfway through the book, and it also has pictures, black and white pictures in here. There was one I was trying to find earlier that I came across. Let's see if I can find one of them. There's another colour plate there in the middle. Lovely. And I'm trying to find this lovely picture that I saw earlier. This one, where they were admitted into the hall. Just cover my face up a minute. I read this again, I think it was about 2016 when I read this. I reread it, and I finished it off at work on my lunch break, and I have to say that I enjoyed the ending of the book even more than I did the first time I read it, and I was actually quite moved by it. And also we do have the famous beginning, obviously with the famous line, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." The reason that I like Jane Austen, maybe it's the way I've been brought up and what I've had read to me or been to see at the theatre, I like the way that she writes. The rhythm, etc. suits me. The classical style is one that I really appreciate. And I like all the discussion about the family and all the daughters and who they're going to marry or possibly marry, and all the parties they have for all the meeting up that they do. Many people find that they can't get on with a Jane Austen. That's fine, doesn't matter. If you haven't tried one, again, have a go at Pride and Prejudice. If you like, if you haven't done it before, watch a series or a film and then try it, because it worked for me for Good Omens. It may work for you equally this way. We come on to finally another connection to a book that I would read over and over, and this one is inspired by A.A. Milne and E.H. Shepard, written by David Benedictus, with decorations by Mark Burgess, and it is Return to the 100-Acre Wood. I really like this because they just decided they're going to revisit the 100-Acre Wood in a more recent time. It even does all the maps at the beginning. It has all the illustrations in, as you'd imagine. And And all the chapters are written in the style that they are written in. For example, chapter 1, in which Christopher Robin returns. Chapter 3, in which Rabbit organises almost everything. Chapter 5, in which Pooh goes in search of honey. And then right at the very end, chapter 10, in which a harvest festival is held in the forest and Christopher Robin brings a surprise. I can't read any of that one. If you haven't read this, but you're familiar with A.A. Milne's other books, obviously Winnie the Pooh, House at Pooh Corner, it is really lovely. Adults can appreciate this just as much as children. I certainly enjoy revisiting this one. That's really the end of this World Book Night vlog. Just to say, there are 2 from last year that I don't have the books for that I would like to recommend. One is The Librarian by Sally Vickers. That's a really, really good book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's a lot of references to lots of books and authors in it, which you'll probably enjoy. The plot does change as well, maybe halfway through, to what you expect it to be. And then there's the other book that I want to recommend that I read September, October last year. Again, I haven't got the book, it was a library book. And that is Celeste Ng, Little Fires Everywhere. That is my book of the year from last year. It's so well written. Once you get moving with the book and the characters, you want to stay with it and you want to find out what happened, why that happened, and what happened to cause the actual event that happened. I can't recommend that highly enough. It's an excellent book. So that's all from me. I don't know when my next one is going to be. I have some ideas from some different vlogs that I will maybe get around to at some point, sometime, hopefully not too soon, because I've got to get over this one. We will see. That's all for now. Happy World Book Night.